Welcome back to the RAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizens Show. I am one of your hosts, Frank Horvath. Joined with me in studio is Mr. Tim Kelly of Apache Solutions. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
I can relate. I am doing all okay also. So we have quite a bit of interesting things to talk about today. Before we get into all of that, I just want to let our listening audience know that we are pre-recording today. My anniversary is this weekend. So instead of us doing something a little bit, later, we're gonna record our show for it to play over the air for Saturday, and it's actually, I don't want to say it's timely. It's unfortunate that we're having to do this, but topic today, current events. Right, it's a hot thing that's on everybody's mind right now. Unfortunately, there's a tragedy that happened up in Maine. I think we're going to discuss that a little bit. There's quite a bit that's floating around on the news, on social media, and things of that nature. So I think we're going to dive into that just a little bit. And then this weekend's also Halloween, right? Big, widely celebrated event, right? A lot of trick or treating, things like that. Families are going to be together. A lot of people out and about. So I think we should discuss that a little bit. So getting back into it. So what's going on in Maine? What are we hearing about in Maine?
So it's looking like there was an active shooter last night who visited two different locations and shot up a place, killing multiple people and wounding others. And he's currently still on the run. Right. So I don't know if he made a break for Canada or if he's still wandering around Maine, if he still has ill intent, if he's
right. There's a lot of unknowns right now.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the reports I had saw was there were some, and we're not going to name him.
Sure.
He's going to be referred to as Dirtbag from this point forward. But
yes.
So apparently Dirtbag had connections down in Connecticut. So I think law enforcement's posting up the Maine Connecticut border, just trying to find this dude right now. But I think it's important for us to really break down, as far as what we know, what happened. So as of, this morning, Thursday, again, it's still a fluid situation. There's still a lot of stuff that's happening. But I think that there are some pretty good indicators of that there are some things that could have been mitigated.
Sure.
Right? So if we start going through and looking at some of the available information that we have, this Dirtbag, there was a history of some mental issues, right? Some mental illness. I don't want to say it's a red flag. Definitely want to get away from that idea. I want to get away from the phraseology. But there's reports that he had made claims that he was going to act violence against locations, not the locations that violence actually happened, but again, a third location. And I don't believe that they were taken serious enough for any sort of intervention to happen.
Right.
And that's really unfortunate.
Sure.
Especially if somebody is vocal about hurting themselves, vocal about hurting others, that kind of thing really should be taken serious, because that means that they're in a state of mind where some potentially, something could happen there.
Right.
Again, it's definitely rough. But anyway, so getting into that a little bit more. So this was happening again up in Lewiston, Maine. There were two reported places: a bar and grill and a bowling alley. And it's, like I said, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Right.
As of this morning, there 16 or so that have been confirmed deceased. There's an additional, according to some sources, 30. It just depends of other injured. Again, it is heartbreaking.
Right.
Absolutely sad. And it's Tim, I was talking with you this morning, and I'm fired up over it. Like, it's hard to say what would happen if you were there.
Right.
I cannot tell you that I would have done anything.
Well, sure. That was same. I mean, the situation is really going to dictate. Right. But we've talked about this in previous shows before. There's nothing that you can do against something like that unless you have the tools and the skills necessary to do something about it.
Right.
And, I think a lot of us get really comfortable in our own freedoms here in America. And the majority of the time we can walk around unscathed. So a lot of folks just leave their guns at home.
Right.
They leave their med kits at home and stuff like that. They don't think they're going to need it.
Right.
Right. And this kind of thing is not new.
Right.
This stuff has been happening for a long time. And it's time for us to start taking responsibility into our own hands instead of waiting on our government to do something for us. We'll get into the political side here in the next segment, but this is a textbook, shooting. Dude had mental issues, right?
Yep.
He's goes on some random shooting spree, and it doesn't appear that there's any serious, like, significant motive, right? He targeted 2 random locations that happen to have a lot of people in the area.
That's where he could inflict the most
Right.
damage.
So
right?
yeah, and he certainly didn't target a police station or an establishment that's going to have resistance.
Right.
Yeah, and so if I don't know what else to tell you guys. Yeah. Start carrying guns.
Right.
Carry a gun on your person.
And train, like, understand the laws, understand, everything that goes along with, being a responsibly armed citizen. Again, I'm not going to Monday night quarterback this thing and say, oh, well, if I was there, this is what would happen, or this is what should have happened. I'm not going to do that. Again, situation dictates. And we've talked about it in other shows. What's your mission, right? Mine is to go home to my family, right? To be a father, to make sure I'm present, make sure I'm there, and getting involved in that third party counter, I don't know.
Right.
It depends. Everything changes. If my family's with me, their safety is priority number 1.
Yeah.
Right. Everything else goes out the window. Even if I was on my own, right?
Sure.
Even if I didn't have anybody else that was with me. If again, me personally, if the possibility of me being injured, me being in a position where I cannot provide or I'm no longer there for my family, I don't know that I would get involved, right? Unless the threat was direct, immediate, in my face, right then, right there.
Guys, we're not trying to call for someone to just show up and be a hero and stop all of this. Like, this is not what we're trying to go after. What Frank's trying to say is, be the one to save yourself, be the one to save your loved ones. Right. We don't expect you to go out and be the hero on the news the next morning.
Right.
We just want you to protect yourself.
Right.
I mean, that's the only way we can stop these things from occurring. It's only if you have some type of tool that you can stop it with, and the knowledge and know-how to do it.
Right. And it comes back to understanding your personal skill sets, understanding where your deficiencies are. Get some training, get some understanding. Get that tool, whatever that may be. If you don't feel like carrying a gun, fine, don't carry a gun. But there are other things that you can put in place that help mitigate some of that risk.
Right, and what I'm thinking here is, like, if the people in these establishments weren't carrying firearms to protect themselves, I'd be willing to bet they weren't carrying any type of medical gear, any type of trauma gear to protect themselves either. So there's no tourniquets, there's no pressure bandages. You're essentially just waiting on police to show up and stop this, or an ambulance to come and drive you away.
That's right. All right, we'll be right back. Let's take a break.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. You're listening to the RAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly, and with me I have Frank Horvath, and we have been talking about current events. As discussed in the last segment, we're actually not recording on Saturday as you are listening, right? We're recording on Thursday, so the day after a very tragic shooting that happened in Maine last night, and we've just been discussing, all the information that we have and the much of the information that we don't have. In the last segment, we were just kind of breaking it down into what happened, and right now, I think we just need to talk about what's really firing us up right now, and that's the media and the spin that they put on this.
Oh, it's horrible.
And yeah, man, in order to achieve some type of agenda. Anyway, I know you got your thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that's going to come out of this, right? The mental health issues, right? We start getting into, the banner waving, red flag. We start getting into like all of these. This is what people should do, and this is how we should handle this type of situation from happening again. And the point that I want to make to that is, like, evil is out in this world, right? There's always going to be access. If you start putting in restrictions on law-abiding citizens, then the non-law-abiding citizens, the criminals of this world, are still going to have access to these firearms, right? They're still going to have access to these tools. They're still going to have access to these things that they're going to use to do mass harm. If we look at other examples in other countries, right, sure, the firearm-related incidences may drop because they have restricted access to firearms. But look at the other violent crime. It is way up. Stabbings and muggings and things of that nature, because it's more blatant. But the piece about this that is really firing me up, and like I said, I'm really we were talking about it in the break, or it's briefly discussed in the break, is that this guy is being painted as he's a firearms instructor. He has a military background. Like, there's all this other stuff that's all being tacked on.
The buzzwords.
And that's it. I was watching. I think it was one of the affiliates. It was NBC or Fox or something like that, and they're hitting on all the buzzwords. They're saying words like assault style rifle. They were saying words like the mass trauma. I mean, they're just going through all this stuff that that incites fear. I mean, that's really what it's doing. It's inciting fear, and out of that fear, some sort of action is going to happen, right? So if we take a look at, again, we don't have all the information yet, but if you just look at the images, you're seeing, the types of firearms that were used. The big one that I heard last night was high capacity magazines.
Oh gosh,
right.
Here we go.
It was
Perfect timing.
This news anchor was saying, yep, and the high capacity magazines were used. This guy would have had to reload. I was like, come on, like even if you're in California, right? So even if you're using it, we'll call it, a low capacity magazine, or 10 rounds or less, that you can still reload that thing. Like, this dirtbag drove between two separate locations that were at least 10 minutes apart from each other. So you're saying in those 10 minutes he could not have, reloaded even a low, we'll call it a low or a standard capacity magazine, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just the political agenda, and then the spin that the media is putting on this. Giving it the awareness, if you want to call that, is just it's sickening. Because the next thing that's going to happen is the hammer's going to drop on us law-abiding citizens, and we're going to start having some of our rights restricted from us or removed from us altogether.
Well, I think our entire society wants this stuff to stop.
Yeah,
we all want this stuff to stop. It needs to go away. But the problem that we're running into is we have so many people out there that want to consolidate all of these buzzwords into a group, identify that group, and then keep them away from these freedoms that we have.
Right.
Take away some, their guns, take away their ammo, take away whatever.
The training aids.
The training aids, that type of thing. Yeah, like we talked about last weekend. It's outrageous. This is not going to stop. Those type of things are not going to stop this, right? Like you can't just suggest that, oh, he was a firearms instructor. Oh man, we got to get rid of this. We got to get rid of this category of people because one person happens to have I have no idea what his rating was. Honestly, because he was in the military, it might have been. I read somewhere that he worked on at a training facility in Seiko,
Seiko,
something like that. Anyway, he worked there. Maybe he was an instructor in the military.
Yeah.
But they're painting this out as a firearms instructor. So now it's such a broad message.
Right.
So they're trying to drag as many people down with this as they possibly can. And then another one that really hits home for me is it's one thing to mention that he was a veteran. It's one thing to mention that he was a firearms instructor, but to do it in such a way that that's his identifier. Right. Like now you are painting this picture that us as veterans, or somebody like me, a veteran firearms instructor, is ready and willing to go out and commit these tragedies.
Right.
And it's just not the case. It's not fair to us, especially the veterans. We see this stuff. And this is what keeps people from going to get help.
Right.
This right here is what keeps our veterans from going to get help, from asking folks about, well, what kind of medication should I do? Or I'm afraid if I get committed into into the mental health ward, then they're going to take away my guns. I won't be able to defend myself. Most of us veterans have this this paranoia when we come back anyway that we're going to be attacked or something like that because we lived with it for so long, and then you're trying to take away our only measures of safety. Like that's the stuff that lingers over our heads. This keeps people from reporting to the VA that they have mental health problems.
Right.
That's what this does.
Yeah.
There is no real help out there. The only thing I can say this actually really gaining any ground and is making a positive difference is holdmyguns.org.
Yeah.
I think organizations such as holdmyguns.org are fantastic ways to encourage folks to go get their mental health checked.
Yep.
And don't worry about having your Second Amendment rights stripped of you. Right. Keep yourself safe. Keep your family safe.
Yep. Now, and like I said, there's so much out there that is negative that's going to come out of this, right?
Right.
So everything about this tragedy is going to be scrutinized. So what firearms were used, right? Where how were they accessed? Were they illegally obtained, right? Was it in high capacity, low capacity? I mean, all this junk, right, is going to come out of this, and then it's just going to further cause issues for everyone else.
Right.
Again, I am not a veteran, but I do claim to be a firearms instructor. I've had quite a bit of training in that realm. But the same thing's gonna come out of that, right? Just like you said, that light of all firearms instructors, right? It's just going to be such a burden on our society, right? They're the media and these political talking pieces, mouthpieces are going to frame this up as this is an issue, this isn't a problem. And again, just like we talked about last week with the restriction of training aids, and anyway, I'm really starting to feel like a target.
Right.
I'm really seeing not just because I help instruct, but it's just another cog that's showing, hey, we don't need our citizens armed. We don't need our citizens trained. We don't need responsibly armed citizens, in our United States, so that dictatorship and tyranny can happen. I'm not saying that we're living under dictatorship, but a lot of these rules, right, that are being put in place that people are not voting directly on, that's not going through Congress, like the stuff that's coming through the ATF, these rulings over what I'm allowed to have, what I'm not allowed to have, that is just arbitrarily put in place and arbitrarily enforced, is just it's not kosher.
Right.
I mean, we have a serious issue there. So I really feel like we really need to be spending some focus on how are we going to handle, how are we going to police these agencies who are making these arbitrary rulings that affect us everyday citizens, and prohibit us from being those responsibly armed citizens.
Right.
At some point, right, there's going to be a place where you will not comply, right? And then so these responsibly armed citizens, right, the people that we're talking to, the people just like us, right, the ones who seek training, the ones who have their concealed carry, who do everything by the letter of the law. At some point, these agencies are going to push us to a point where we cannot be responsibly armed citizens. We will be, responsibly armed criminals, unfortunately, in the eyes of them, right?
Right.
And that is such a sad, depressing thought. But I honestly feel like that's kind of the direction that we're going.
I mean, we should be encouraging this. I mean, we should be encouraging folks to take it upon themselves to defend themselves. I mean, at the end of the day, as I said a while ago, unfortunately, and I hate to imagine stuff like this, but you and I have to spend our time in research with this type of thing as part of our job. But you can imagine these folks had to sit back and wait.
Right.
After all of that trauma, after all of that tragedy, who knows? It probably took him just a few minutes or whatever to commit the travesty, right? Jump in his car and leave. And meanwhile, you're left there with a bloody mess, watching your friends are dead or dying, and you have nothing to support them. Right. You're not prepared for it. And there's no possible way that law enforcement could get there in time, could predict that this was going to happen, get there in time and stop it from happening.
Right.
And there's no possible way an ambulance or EMTs could arrive and put that pressure bandage on there immediately when it should have been, or that tourniquet on immediately when it should have been.
Right.
Let's talk about it more when we get back.
Yep. Welcome back to the RAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizens Show, where we are in depth conversation right now talking about the tragedy that happened yesterday as we are pre-recording. We're talking about the everything that happened up in Maine, and we're also discussing the media, the political spin, and then really the other piece of that, right? So it's not necessarily what the tools that you can use to defend yourself, but it's tools that after some sort of trauma happens, how you can help potentially save your life, save another's life from that traumatic injury. And again, that's just another skill set. That's something that you really should have in your bag. It's not all guns and gear. It's not all slinging. It's med, right?
Right.
What is more likely going to happen? Are you more likely to have a firearm related incident, or are you more likely to roll up on a car accident?
Right.
Big weekend this weekend, right? So next couple of days, there's a lot of trick or treating. There's a lot of stuff that's happening that's around us. It's dark. There's a lot of people on the roads. I could guarantee you that unfortunately, there's probably going to have a pedestrian involved car accident. Even if it's a little bump up. But being prepared, having some tools, having some skill sets, having some knowledge to be able to handle those type of traumas, right? Those things that potentially could happen to you or your family. It is so incredibly important.
Hey, folks, I'm going to mention a product that a lot of us within the Apache cadre carry. So get your pen and paper ready. Or type this down on your phone. Go to visit darkangelmedical.com. Use promo code Apache20 for 20% off of your next purchase. Guys, they have all kinds of great stuff in there. If you have any questions about this, like maybe you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know what you're really getting yourself into, but you need some med gear in your vehicle, or you need something on your person or something like that, and you have questions about it, send us an email. What's that email, Frank?
rac@apacheNC.com. RAC@apacheNC.com.
Yeah, so send that email to us, and if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to help guide you in the right direction. But they've got some great vehicle kits, stuff that you can mount on the back of your headrest, one that you can keep around your ankle, underneath your pants, yep. Stuff that just fits in your pocket. Like it's something, right? At the very least, use this as an opportunity to purchase a tourniquet. You can spend $36. Less than that if you use our promo code, and buy yourself a Gen 7 cat tourniquet. Stick that in your pocket and carry it around. I mean, that's a very, very important piece of gear.
Yeah, and get some training, learn how to use this stuff, right? I mean, there's a number of resources that are out there, but go and physically find somebody. Physically, don't just watch a YouTube video. I know we're all guilty of doing something like that, but go and actually get some one-on-one training with somebody. Give Apache a call, 336-422-6859. You reach out to us, give us a call. Schedule a session and say, hey, look, maybe you don't care much about, the firearms piece. I understand. But, the med piece is something else that we could also help you with, at least, basic med, basic first aid, situational awareness. I mean, there's just so much more than just, using a tool. There's attitude skills. I mean, there's so much that's out there that you can do that doesn't involve, deadly force, right? You can use less lethal that would help also mitigate a threat.
Yeah.
Or again, in the case of, the Halloween weekend, all the stuff that's going around, just safety, personal safety, right? So if you see this, you'll joke about, the candy mobile, right? You got a van that's all blacked out or whatever that's going to come take, hey little boy, you want some candy? That kind of thing, whatever. Just being aware, watching out for kids, watching out for other people that are around. Halloween traditionally, at least in my neighborhood, is a time where the hooligans come out and they will teepee houses and egg your house or play ding dong ditch or whatever.
That's harmless stuff.
It's harmless, right? Yeah. But people get so amped up over that kind of stuff. So
you're looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so there's a lot. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So prepare for Halloween. What are some other things that we can do to help prepare for our Halloween weekend?
But before we do that, we were talking about trauma and sorry.
Do Derailed.
we were talking about the med kits and stuff like that. I just wanted to make sure I also plug in Jonathan Willis will be coming down teaching his real world trauma class next February. Yeah. So if you have never taken any type of trauma class, this is it. This is awesome. So it'll be a Sunday, February 11th. The title of the class is called Real World Trauma. You can look up Gunset or shoot us an email at rac@apacheNC.com, RAC@apacheNC.com, and we'll help point you in the right direction for that class. You'll leave there with not just a certification from his class, but you'll also leave with the Stop the Bleed certification from that class too.
And if you do go to a class, the likelihood that you're going to see a tube get shoved down my nose is very high. It is very likely.
The nasal pharyngeal or what?
Oh yeah, man. I took that class as a student earlier this year, and it's not something he normally does in his classes. This was, we're friends. It was a special case kind of thing, and we had somebody that had asked about that, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do that." We've all told Zach, right? We've had him on the show before. We've all told Zach to come out to do it, and Zach was like, "I'm not doing it," and I was like, "All right, well, I guess that means it's me. I guess I'm doing this. I'm gonna do it." And I've had it done before. It's a non-event, but it's just one of those swallow. Trying to think about it. But they're always a little bit too long, right? For me anyway. So it like tickles the back of my throat. So I'm sitting there trying not to gag, right? I'm like, okay, I'm okay. It's not good. Anywho,
so now we can talk about candy and whatnot.
I'm ready for my emotional support Reese's. I'm going to need that after the show.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. Hey, you broke my heart, man. I was really hoping for a pick-me-up this morning. I get in here, and you're just, like, sitting in a chair looking all kinds of mad. I'm like, oh, great.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be good.
Fired up. Anyway.
All right, so prepare for Halloween. Guys, this like we said a while ago, these tragedies have been happening for a really long time. They're going to continue to happen. It's just... either way you look at it, it's not just going to wake up overnight. Somebody's going to say something on the news that's going to magically make evil disappear. Right. It's not going to happen. All right. So right now we're talking about Halloween, which is a holiday that's celebrated all across America. We have kids that dress up like, their favorite cartoon character or something like that, and they go door to door, or they go to these great big events that have like trunk or treats or something like that. And what are we seeing right now? We're seeing a lot of these places being targeted by these dirt bags, right?
Right.
And that's something we need to walk in there mentally prepared for. I'm not saying don't take your kid trick or treating. Go take your kid trick or treating. Just have some gear prepped and have your head on a swivel. Yeah. Like don't be looking for the hoodlum that's going to be TPing your house or soaping your car. Right? That's harmless stuff. That's not the stuff I'm talking about.
It's kids being kids.
Look for the thing that really stands out. And this is a tricky time. I mean, you've got folks that are dressed up and everything else. I mean, it is a very, very tricky time. So, which should put more emphasis on being prepared and more ready, right? To see something like that before it happens. Right. Have those pre-decisions put in place, right? Right. Map this out in your mind. Know where the nearest exits are. If you're going to a location that's you're doing a trunk or treat or something like that, and maybe it's indoor. One year, I remember when I was a little kid, my mom took me to the mall, and there was all these different stations, and I got a ton of candy there. But maybe that thing still exists. All right, your corn mazes, stuff like that. Be looking for certain things. Know where the nearest EMT is, or something along those lines.
Areas of egress, right? Just like understanding, you're walking up to complete random strangers' homes. You're asking for candy, right? So, it's not necessarily something that happens on a daily. But again, it's all in good fun. I'm not saying be paranoid, but just be vigilant. Be aware of what's going around. Be aware of traffic. A lot of people are walking up and down streets. Some let's call them a teenage kid, just got their driver's license or whatever. They may be not paying attention, not used to all these people being out on the road at night.
Right.
There could be all different things, but But yeah, definitely get some gear, get some just some basic stuff. The something that we'll have with us are going to be just a boo boo kit.
Right.
My kids are going to be in a Halloween costume that is probably too long. They're probably going to trip. They're probably going to fall. They're going to be upset because their candy hit the ground, but they also have scraped hands. Right? That is much more likely than anything else is
Yeah.
going to happen. So again, don't be paranoid, but be prepared. And I remember, we got just a little bit of time, but so a couple years, it's been several years ago. I had a cousin, right, who was all dressed up. This was Halloween, and this is before we had kids. They knocked on the door, thought it was just another trick or treater, opened up the door, and this kid, right, and again, mask, and a whole thing, just starts walking in the house. I'm like, okay, bud. Hey, bud. How are you doing? Because I had no idea it was him, right? I didn't know it was my cousin. I was like, hey, bud, how you doing? You're right. Put my hand out, and I'm kind of like pushing him back out of the door, and he's like pushing through me to try to come into the house. And I was like, stop! Like I was about to mace the kid, and it would not have turned out well, but because he was being forceful
Yeah.
coming into the house. But I didn't know. I didn't know. He was a bigger kid. I didn't know if it was a kid or if it was a teen or what was going on here. And then they're like, ha ha ha, big joke. I'm like, oh, y'all don't know me. Like, this is extended family, or like they're not, Anywho,
Yeah.
and that could have been an incident, but no, like just being aware, just go out, have fun, don't be paranoid about all this mess, but
Right.
just be attentive.
Right.
A couple episodes ago we talked about the OODA and just having that awareness about yourself. Just understand, look for these different cues and look for different things. Body posture tells a lot, eyes tell a lot. Even if the face is occluded, there are still cues that you can use to help assume the intent of somebody.
Yeah.
So these are all good things, all things to think about.
Yeah, I've been in the past. I've been accused of living in fear, and that's not at all what I do. I live a very, very healthy, and I feel like a good life.
Yeah.
And I'm also very well aware of what's around me,
Yeah.
and I have the tools and the skills necessary. So that's what it means to be a responsibly armed citizen.
Yep.
So,
Love it. Well, so that's really going to wrap up this segment. Coming up next, we have our last competency of the month. Competency of the month. We're going to tease it a little bit. Who needs a revolver? All right. So we've discussed that quite a bit. Let's talk about that a little bit more when we come back.
sounds good. Welcome back to the BRAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizens Show, where we talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly. With me, I have Frank Horvath, and we have been talking about current events. This is a pre-recorded show. Today is actually Thursday, October 26th. Last night, we had some pretty tragic events take place in Maine, and we've been discussing that. So if you are just now jumping in, We've been talking about the active shooter that happened in Maine, the fact that he's still out on the run, different media and political angles. And the last segment, we were talking about preparing for the Halloween weekend with all of that in mind. So now what we're going to talk about is the Compsy of the Month. So we're going to take a little step in a different direction here, try and cool down away from all the tragedy.
Done talking about dirtbags.
Yeah, start talking about some different competencies and how it relates to the responsibly armed citizen. So let me explain the competency of the month first. If you're unfamiliar to this, the competency of the month is something that we started using as an internal study, if you will, something to challenge us as instructors to give presentations, write articles, and do more and dive in deeper into specific subjects that we refer to as competencies. And when we started the Rack Show, I thought, man, this would be a great opportunity to share this with our listeners and our viewers. So, the competency of the month this month, what we've also challenged to the rest of our cadre is who needs a revolver, and discuss the practical use of a revolver in a defensive context. Now, I've got a little time behind a revolver. I've become rather familiar with them over the years. I'm nowhere near as educated as Mr. Frank Horvath is. He's spent a little bit more time in it. I think he's a little more infatuated with them than I am. I like looking at them. Handling them. I like collecting them. I have struggled finding practical uses, though, for them in a defensive context. Now, I haven't said, that's not to say that I haven't put on a revolver and carried it around the house, or taken it hunting or something like that, and used that as my self-defense gun. I'm a little more leery about taking that out to, grocery shopping and stuff like that.
I can see that. So for me, I wouldn't take it out just grocery shopping, right? Not as a primary firearm, right? So maybe as a secondary, as a backup, right? I think that there's absolutely a place for that, especially when you get into like the smaller 5-shot revolvers. They're much easier to conceal. They're much more comfortable than like a full-size semi-automatic handgun, especially when you're carrying them in such a way that it's not ideal. So, for example, like, ankle carry or something like that, right? It's not in a place that your primary tool is at.
Right.
I think that's an absolute, that's an excellent, place for them, personally. As long as you can like reach your ankle, as long as you train, as long as as long as you have a way of being able to access that tool, reliably, and that tool is safely, in a position that it can't be accessed by others, right? So it needs to be inside of a good holster. And you still need to have these things put in place. But also the other place that I find myself reaching for a revolver, or even over a semi-automatic firearm, are going to be places that are prohibitive with the use of a firearm, or prohibited places. Now, I'm not saying I'm carrying these firearms in places that firearms are not allowed. I'm again, law-abiding citizen here, but places where I know that if somebody else would be uncomfortable if they did see that, right? Again, a revolver is a little easier for me to conceal, especially with my body shape, my size, right? I got the whole dad muffin top going on over here, so my dad muffin top can very easily cover up my revolver, much easier than a full size, carry gun. But that's my world, right?
Yeah.
That's I have quite a bit of trigger time behind a revolver. I'm infatuated with them. I really enjoy pressing the trigger. I enjoy playing John Wick or whatever however you want to play that, put that out there. But again, that's what works best for me. Now, as my primary, like as my like immediate wake up go to, absolutely not. They're not as reliable. They're really not.
Right.
You know, there's so many other like springs, and there's so many other maintenance things that are involved with that people just they make the assumption, or they hear from a cousin, from a buddy who said that
Right.
revolvers are more reliable. And it's not the case at all.
Yeah. Now I like the idea or the concept of using a revolver as a backup gun. I want to talk about that word backup for a second, though. That's often confused with, oh, you ran out of ammo in your 17 round Glock and your other 17 round spare mag, and now you're down to your 5-shot revolver. That's not what backup means, but that's often how it's interpreted.
Right.
It's often interpreted as in I'm low on ammo for my primary, and now all I have is I have this as a backup. That's not what it means. It's actually a better word for it would just be alternate tool, like alternate gun.
Yep.
Because there are so many different instances where you may need to access that backup gun, right, before you go to your primary.
Right.
Maybe you can't get to your primary because of the physical position that you're put in.
Absolutely, you're
Right.
wrapped up in something.
Yeah, you could be wrapped up in something. Somebody could be in the mount, you know, and you're on the ground. They're blocking your draw stroke, or it just wouldn't be strategically advantageous
Right.
to draw your handgun at that point. So having a revolver around your ankle might provide easier access and just a better tool altogether. Now, it is an alternate tool. That's really what it's meant for. I was watching a thing with Craig Douglas the other day, and he was talking about accessing a gun out of his pocket. And pocket carry is a really tricky thing.
Yeah.
Like especially when you start talking about revolvers.
Yep.
Some of these little bitty mouse semi-autos are a lot easier to conceal.
Yeah.
But the revolvers, because of the actual cylinder itself, tends to be a little bit more bulky.
Yeah.
So you have to have a really good pocket holster.
Yep.
Something like is it Mika holsters? That's what I've got for mine. Great pocket holster, conceals your gun really well.
There's
but in
some
a specific kind of pants.
Yeah, there's some really great holster companies out there. Now, I don't like fabric. I don't like leather. Just personal preference. So I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but with proper training and preparation and maintenance of
Mm.
these holsters, you're fine. I tend to gravitate towards Kydex holsters, even with my revolvers. I know I can hear right now the screams of all the other revolver aficionados out there about well, how dare you put plastic on that gun? Yeah. Anyway, but I prefer, like I said, having that trigger guard not exposed. I prefer having that positive retention that's on the gun, and that's just personal preference.
Sure. Some good examples of those holsters. I know you've got a few. JM Custom Kydex makes a fantastic holster for most J-frame, K-frame revolvers.
Yep.
You can get into a really nice holster from them, and you just essentially tell him where what position you're carrying it in, and he'll make it fit you. It's good work.
Black Rhino is another one that's out there that I've used regularly, especially for the Chiappas. Again, they're it's a different shaped firearm, a different shaped revolver, but the weight kydex that they use, the tooling that's put in place is just phenomenal. But yeah, there's definitely, I feel there's definitely a place for a revolver in modern self-defense. I feel like practically that it will not be my primary, but I feel like I know that there are certain scenarios where it may work out best.
I'd say one of the best contextual applications I've heard for carrying a revolver. One of the best reasons to carry a revolver was actually mentioned to me by our friend Dan Brady. Dan's also an instructor with us. He's a cop down on the coast. But anyhow, he and I were having a conversation about it, and he's like, "Oh man, I've got one for you. It's simple stuff." He's like, "You're spoiled. You're spoiled. You have fairly warm 4 seasons down here. You don't have to get all bundled up." I was a cop in Vermont for however many years. He's like, you have to unravel yourself like a Christmas present to get to your gun sometimes. So really not much your fully concealed appendix carry Glock 19 is going to do over my pocket carried in the jacket or in the coat revolver.
Right.
Having the
Never even
ability
thought
to
about
just
that.
shove his hands in these giant pockets, underneath all of this, and to have that gun to get, to get the point across, or to get to his other gun, right? It buys him time.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot better of an idea than just trying to defeat all of those different garments to access a gun.
Right. Yeah, and there are other things. When you talk about that, I think of Jim Cirillo, right? So I start thinking of like New York Carry, going through and like cutting the trigger guard literally off of the revolver, so that when you have big thick gloves and things like that, you can still access the trigger, you can still manipulate that firearm, and not have to think about defeating all this other extra stuff. Absolutely, yeah. That's, again, we are spoiled. We're down here in the South, didn't even think about that, but that's absolutely something to consider, something to think about. Awesome. Well, Tim, got about a minute left. Any other final thoughts for the end of the day?
Man, it's been a pretty wild couple of months. We've had some really successful classes. Taught a class up in Virginia. Got sick. Thankfully, we take instructors with us that can teach the class as a backup.
Right.
So Dan really jumped in and helped out a lot in that class up there. Zach's shotgun classes. I mean, he's killing it. He's doing a fantastic job.
We've had a blast, literally.
His next one I'm really excited for. It's very much blended to be sort of like our Apache pistol metrics, but this is Apache shotgun metrics, and that is coming up when? December 2nd, something along those lines. Give us an email. We'll get you the dates, but be on the lookout. Watch us on Facebook and Instagram and all of that jazz.
It's Rack at ApacheNC.com. Reach out to us for any of your questions, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.